This is the Sales Bible Podcast, episode 266, Anti-Transactional Selling, an interview with Bill Keeler.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers, and today we meet Bill Keeler. Bill is the president of Market Makers Ideas. It's a Richmond, Virginia marketing company focused on small businesses. I asked Bill to come to the Sales Babble podcast so he could just share with us the process that he uses to enroll new clients. Just like Josh Brown, who we heard back in March, Bill believes that it's all about buying, not selling. Bill takes a very anti-transaction approach to when he sells, and he does this by giving his prospects homework before they're customers now. But before I go any deeper into it, let's let Bill explain this. So, with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Bill. Are you ready to babble?
Let's do it.
Bill, you are the founder and president, I assume, of Market Makers. It looks like you've been doing this for quite a while, since 2004. That's a long time. What's Market Makers?
Yeah, so Market Makers is very simply, we're a small business that wants to develop the highest and most consistent revenues for the other small businesses in our community, and that is our single reason for being.
And you're out in you're in Richmond, is that right?
Richmond, Virginia.
And you and I were talking earlier about, because you had a lot of strong opinions about selling, because even though you're in the marketing business, you have to do a fair amount of sales to earn your clients, right? You just can't put Facebook ads up and they magically show up and give you a call, right?
Right. No, we are a small business looking for highest and most consistent revenues ourselves. So we are living the same dream we're trying to help our clients live.
In our previous conversations, we had talked about what makes for great selling, but you had an alternative view. You said it's not about selling, it's about buying. And I thought that would be a great way for us to kick this conversation off.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So we operate out of convention. Our belief is 180 degrees away from conventional sales. You know, sales has been the same for generations and generations and generations. And 30 or 35 years ago, it went from being what it was to being features and benefits selling. And in the end of the day, that was just a different wrapper. And the position we take with our small business clients is vastly different. And here's why. Here's a first fundamental belief. A small business is not a little corporation. They don't run the same. They don't live the same. There's very little about what it's like to be within a small local company than it is to be within a larger organization. So the pressures are different. The resources are vastly different. The sensitivities are much higher. And so it doesn't actually translate. All that conventional sales model and those methodologies don't naturally translate down to a local small business. So we've developed ways for those people to behave and live within a different sort of set of confines to accomplish what they need to accomplish for their unique strata. And the first one that is really the big one is we don't believe there's any such thing as selling at all. There is only buying. And the reason we think that's true is because in the end of the day, a great salesperson, terrible salesperson, it doesn't make any difference. The person who sort of owns that title on their business card, doesn't matter what town, what industry, how long they've been doing it, they go in and meet with a potential client. And they do their song and dance, and they do their presentation, and they can do it any way they want, great, poorly, our way, another way, it doesn't make any difference. As soon as they are done, whatever it is they've got to do, everything falls into the hands of the buyer to make a decision. It is always the buyer's full choice to do it. And so our position is then we need to take a buyer-centric approach. How do you reach a buyer? How do you connect, attract the right buyers, connect with them, and then inspire them to make their choice, because it's all their choice, to whatever it is you're talking about. Now, that involves a lot of stuff, but the real key to that is shifting your perspective as to what your role is within the confines of that new relationship. And if you're trying to sell, you're trying to do something that isn't yours to do in the first place. So at the very least, you're being inefficient and wasteful.
You know, this follows up really well with an interview that I had with Josh Brown the other day. He said the very same thing. Why do we study sales? Why are there books on sales? And really what we ought to be studying is buying. Why aren't there books on buying? The buying
Right.
process.
Exactly right. Well, I mean, so who are the most difficult people to earn business from? Salespeople. They're already 2 tricks ahead of you in
Yes.
the conversation. Right. And so I'm the worst buyer. If you show up at my door or you send me an email, you have to be handing me gold to buy your stuff. It's miserable.
Yeah, I'm the
And
same way. Exactly the
right.
same way.
Right. And so from my standpoint and the way we work with our clients, like they don't have time for that waste. Look, my best friend was in biotech, worked for one of the largest biotech companies in the world. He would go out to Japan, go to the Far East, and he would meet with these people to sell him his stuff. It would take the craziest amount of tricks. But in the end of the day, we're talking about billion-dollar deals. The small business in Richmond that needs sales today, they don't have time for that. And so our belief is let's remove this artificial adversarial setup between people, get down to business, and actually just have really great conversation, which doesn't mean you're going to get people to buy. It just means we're going to help people buy more often, or remove the wrong people from the conversation and get that song and dance out of the way.
Okay, so you said that it's all about having a real conversation. Why don't you walk us through the process that you're using to create these conversations?
That's a great question. So the first thing we do is we take an anti-transactional approach. So when we work with a local business who's trying to raise their revenues, who's trying to add team, who's trying to do something productive and going down the line, it is a requirement of market makers that our clients actually complete what we call a table setting program. And that is to make sure they have a strong strategic plan, a well-written, easy to understand, easy to convey marketing message that speaks in high value. We look for rapid impact value, that they've got a sales system for our team members or their team members to run on and track, that they've got time management programs in place. So the first thing we do before we help our clients is make sure that they're available to be helped. And what's been interesting about this is when they come to us for any of the varying programs we use, we often end up helping build these 4 cornerstones of structure. And then we're actually not the best route for them to follow beyond that, but they are now elevated to accomplish things they weren't before. Everybody wants the money in fast, but we don't want to work with clients. We won't work with businesses who aren't prepared to do that off-season stuff, that preseason work, which is the hardest work. But that grandly accelerates what can happen after with your company when you have those in place. So that's the very first thing we do. We make sure that the table is set.
Okay, what's number 2?
Number 2 is then a strong identification of who your target market is. So we break the world out into 4 potential populations as far as a business being able to choose its target market. In the center of these concentric circles, the A players, they are the absolute best people to buy from you. And that's a really critical delineator. So we'll work with people. I'll ask them, so tell me who your best client is. And they all go into a list of these people or companies or what have you that they want to be their buyers for whatever reason. Usually always they've got large dollars. But we ask them to reverse the consideration on that, be able to come in and say, well, who are you absolutely best for? And once we realign that perspective on how to choose your A players, everything shifts. Your B group are the people that are outside of that. They are people who are like your A's, but there's some differential between them, but they are still extremely strong for you because you are extremely strong for them. They're the 2 groups we say are your marketing targets. Spend money, spend time on them. Don't spend money and time on anyone else in the world. The third layer that's out there are what we call our C clients. They're your retail clients. They're circumstantial. So maybe it's the company that does high-end stone countertops and they do big, expensive kitchens, but they've got some buyers that want to do small vanity work. Maybe they're retail. So you wouldn't stop in the height of the season to do a $1,000 vanity when you're doing $20,000 kitchens. But in January, you could plug them in. And so there are people that circumstantially you will do work for because they're good for you and you're good for them in certain conditions. Then there's the entire rest of the world, the D population. Never under any circumstances, if they come with gold bullion and promises, lock the doors, put more alligators at the moat, never, ever let them into your company because ultimately you are not nearly as good for them as you should be. They don't know that. you should. And when you try to make it work, it'll only be awful for them and 10 times worse for you.
Got it.
So really, I mean, large organizations are pretty good at figuring these things out. The small business on the corner, they're living in fear. They're living in scarcity mentality. They want anyone who will buy from them to buy. And we have to tell them, you're now officially reacting to the world. You've lost all your identity. We need to make sure that people understand who you are and who you're best for. And so we sort all of these things out before we do any complete work for them.
Okay, so number 2 is figuring out your ideal client. What's your third step?
Third is figuring out how you are absolutely poised to be unique in the world. So every time I meet with a small business, or any of our team, we meet with a small business that is interested in potentially engaging us to help them. This is the lens we're going through. Are we best for this small business? And so one of the earliest questions we ask in the first sit down is, give me the one reason that if I were a buyer that was in the market for what you have, tell me the one reason I should buy from you instead of anyone else who does what you do or has what you have. The one single reason. Nobody ever comes up with an answer. We call it meaningful distinction. So you need to be able to make sure I understand how you're poised to be best for me. Everybody says things like, well, we've been in business for X number of years and we're family owned and we have 141 years of combined experience.
Right.
If I found another company that had 142 years, does that make them better than you? Well, no, because we really care about our clients. And the thing is, because they live in fear and scarcity, they haven't time to sort all this out. They probably don't even know how to have sorted all this out. So we help them understand, how do we create a true distinction in your space, which is a product of not just what you have, but who you want to work with. So if you and I are both selling the same thing, we're providing the same thing to the community, but you're working with a different market than I'm working with, we're not competitors. We should be having lunch once a quarter and working out how to refer to one another, because my worst clients could be your best and vice versa. So we want our clients to see the world very differently than they probably do, which is get up, hurry up, start again tomorrow. And we're trying to undo that tangle, give them security, give them consistency, give them alignment. And from there, they're poised to do a lot more than they ever were, whether it's with us or not.
All right. So what's the fourth step?
Depending on who they are, we will either come in and, as a small business, we will either provide them with salespeople on a fractional basis. So if they're a pretty small company, they've got internal players acting as their salespeople, but they're not trained salespeople. They're not really in the salesperson position on the org chart, and they failed at hiring salespeople, which is very common. They typically say, I've tried salespeople. Salespeople don't work. And I think they clearly work. They're everywhere right now. Right? I got into your door. They work. We will provide fractional salespeople to really small companies who can't afford a full-time salesperson or who aren't ready to make that level of commitment because they've just been cooked in the past with bad players and bad decisions, or they've got a couple of 3 outside salespeople, and the owner is acting as GM, and she's acting as ops manager, and she's acting as buyer and seller, and she's buying paper towels every Tuesday for the kitchen, and she's also pretending she's sales manager or thinks she's sales manager, and we'll come in and do some vetting as to exactly what she's trying to accomplish with each player. And what we learn is she's not giving them the time. She's not tending to individually or the unit because she just doesn't have time. She's doing too many things. So we'll provide a fractional sales manager, somebody that can really give the necessary but not micromanaging level of attention to each of the players, strategy, largely to the whole, and run that for a fraction of the price of a manager they don't need full time, which is why we won't do either of these things if they haven't developed a plan or a marketing message, because it would be useless. We'd have no roadmap of any kind to follow to gauge or measure success.
So how do you get people to fill this out when they don't know you? We talked about at the very beginning, we talked about it's buyer driven.
Buyer driven.
The buyer probably wasn't even thinking about this when you reached out to them, right? They're working in the business, not on it.
Correct.
So how do you turn that around?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like any good effort at creating relatedness with people, whether it's in business or it's, you go to my house to grill out burgers and I'm having a bunch of other people over and you start a conversation. It's the same conversation. You ask good questions. You ask questions about purpose, and you ask questions about interests, and you ask questions about goals and desires. And while you're doing that, you're asking yourself, am I best for them? Does it make sense for me to keep talking to them? And, it's different with every business model you're talking to, but in the end, you find the pressure points. The good news is they're always the same thing. They either don't have a team, so they don't have any consistent foot on the gas pedal, or they've got a team that's not performing as well as it needs to, and they don't know what to do, or they don't have time to do it. And it's just a few questions that open up space, and then you just say, have you ever considered X? What would it look like if you thought about Y? And most people aren't doing what we're doing. We're fortunate in that space right now, and usually it's curious enough for people to say, all right, I'd talk about that. And then we go talk about it. And we take the position, just like we teach our clients to take the position, maybe this will turn into an engagement. But I'm not trying to make it so. I'm trying to figure out along the way, is this good for you, and does it remain good for us the whole way? And if we get to the end of that and we think so, we say, let's write a proposal and talk about it. And then we go.
This really makes sense to me. It's actually got me thinking about a client that I'm working with right now. We have this onboarding process that when they become clients, we have them fill it out. And it actually talks about a lot of these things that you talked about, number 3 and number 4. But it's interesting as a selling tool. It's also kind of useful, like showing them ahead of time. This is the things that we're going to be doing. I wonder if it behooved me to have them fill that out to begin with.
Yeah, well, literally, my wife and I are looking at a pretty large investment for a house, and we got a business model in mind. And it's out in the country. There are only 2 neighbors, and those 2 people could wreck it by going to the county. And so we were like, well, before we write a business plan and go to the county and start a 5-month process and negotiate price, maybe we should just go talk to the 2 neighbors. Like, the art of conversation has been given up, right? So salespeople for generations were taught to control the conversation, to manage the conversation is the term. And that's pretty adversarial. Nobody likes to have the conversation you're in be managed by someone else. And so we believe you put all that away and just go have a straightforward, integrity-oriented, honest conversation. And look, a lot of times, good people say no. And maybe in your heart it's the wrong decision for them, but it's still their decision. Everything we're talking about right now is entirely about your perspective as to what your identity is in this business. That's all it is. And if your identity is you can go make people do things, you can get past gatekeepers, you can woo people with lottery tickets, you can snap your fingers and smile and all that stuff. If you think you can move people to where you want them to be, then you're an old school salesperson that could be financially successful. But every single day, human beings are moving more and more away from that model. We have built an entire universe called the internet to avoid salespeople. To me, that's insanity. So we want to put the human touch back in it. And at a local business level, they need that. They want that. They're comforted by that relatedness. And that involves having a straightforward conversation, including finding out early. This isn't going to happen. Even if it should. Move on.
I can't agree with you more, because I bet you at least once a day somebody from LinkedIn, a marketing company on LinkedIn, reaches out to me, and the first thing they do is they start shoving some program down me. They built no rapport, haven't done any discovery, haven't created any conversation with me, don't know anything about my business, don't realize I'm an expert about some of these things. They're actually trying to pitch me.
Right.
It's just maddening. So that's what the internet's done to some regards. It's just
Sure. My wife has a program where she buys clothes online, like millions of people do, but now she's got it where they actually just send her stuff they think she'd like, and she sends back what she doesn't want or what doesn't fit. And I was like, you've removed human beings from this process. Like, that's at the willingness to try on stuff you don't like and get rid of it versus any other way you could. It's crazy talk. Crazy talk.
Yeah. My wife does it. That's Stitch Fitch.
Yeah. She does the same thing with wine, which I'm happy about, but the clothes thing drives me crazy. Yeah, in this space we're talking about, we use the analogy all the time that if you went to your doctor for whatever you went to your doctor for, and he gave you a very pathetic exam, and instantly was jamming a procedure down your throat or instantly jamming some pharma med down your throat. And we've all experienced a doctor that has done that. You become less trusting of that doctor, who presumably you should be very trusting with. Like, I'm a big fan of the doc that says, I know this is inconvenient. I want you to come back one more time or go over here. I just want to be thorough before I do anything. Like, I never liked, because I'm a time-strapped guy, I never like that I've got to do one more thing. But when that doctor tells me to do that, whatever comes out of that, I'm going to believe that doctor. I don't think our work, whoever we are, should have any less nobility, any less integrity, any less honesty than the work that a doctor does. I don't know why we should be in a hurry to get someone to spend money with us. I want to prescribe the best thing for them because, A, then I've done my job. I've lived our purpose. And B, that person's going to keep spending money and spread the good news. Like, that's good on good. And it all breaks down when you try to become a salesperson.
Yep. I can't help but disagree. I can't help
Crazy talk.
I can't help but agree, I should say.
Yeah. People are buying cars and guitars they've never played or driven just so they don't have to talk to a salesperson. That's crazy talk.
That is crazy talk. With that said, also, the internet is actually making people feel lonelier than ever, especially social media.
Yeah.
So I think people are hungry for relationships. People are actually hungry. There was a study showed where people would like to be talking to other people when they're standing in line waiting to get on a bus or a train, but they think the other person would find it annoying. But each of them wish somebody else would reach out. It's like it's in this case of deadlock.
It's an odd version of the prisoner's dilemma. Nobody wants to go first because they'll be shot when they realize the person next to you is like, oh, please talk to me. I want to talk to you. Yeah. That's the saddest thing I ever heard.
Yeah. And that's why everybody's looking at their phones.
A colleague of mine in our networking group regularly says the most important thing you can do in any business relationship is when you walk up to a person and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, what's your name? And then get it going. Like, the art of that has gone away.
Yeah.
Crazy. I've got a new guitar I've never played coming, and my wife has who knows how many dresses showing up tomorrow to try on.
I don't remember much Thai, but when I lived in Thailand 3 years ago, I learned Kunchuarai, which was, what's your name?
Right.
People were awed that I could do that.
Vital.
This gringo could do something like
right.
that.
Good for you.
Just the simplest of things. Anyway, Bill, how can people find you online?
They can go to marketmakers-ideas.com and learn all about it, learn our story as to how we got involved in this crazy journey to help people, learn a little bit about me, learn what we do, who we've done it with, and how we can help.
Awesome. And people would find you, they'd go, they can
LinkedIn.
Find you on LinkedIn, right?
LinkedIn. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find us on Facebook. They can go to the website. They can email me at bill@marketmakers-ideas.com. Our position is every meeting, meaning every conversation online, on the phone, face-to-face at your favorite Panera coffee shop, is either a marketing meeting or a sales meeting, which means it is going to either turn into a potential money engagement between us, or I'm going to know enough about you and you me that we can send better help to each other's direction. So everything is valuable. The only meeting that doesn't make sense is the one that I shouldn't have had in the first place. So anybody wants to talk, we are happy to help however we can, including many referrals, not us.
I love that. All right, Bill. Well, thank you very much for babbling with us today here on
Thanks for having me babble. I dug it. Totally dug it.
Okay, just to tidy up the conversation, I'd like to urge you to be that one person who starts up conversations with strangers. Make it a habit so that when you're selling, you'll be warmed up. You can always start a conversation by kicking off like, hey, I'm Pat. What are you working on today? Is that right? How come? Hey, wow, that's something else. These are the kinds of things you need to do to get people to start chatting. Because the thing to remember is that anyone you meet could be a prospective customer. And if they're not, they might know somebody who is a prospective customer. But they're not going to tell you if they don't know you. Get to know them. Take an interest in their lives, and they'll take an interest in you. Now, last Friday, my son, Captain John Helmers, earned his United States Army Ranger tab in Fort Benning, Georgia. At the Ranger School graduation ceremony, his mom, my wife, Denise Helmers, pinned the Ranger tab on his left shoulder, and he said, "I'm so glad to have this over. This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole life." But this is the thing. Earning that tab has been a goal of John since high school. At the end of the course, he lost 24 pounds. He lost the feeling of his palms in his hands. But he also lost that gnawing itch of trying to get into Ranger School, because now he's a Ranger. Ranger School is a 61-day combat leadership course oriented towards small unit tactics, and it's all about learning how to lead in combat while enduring great mental, psychological stress, and physical fatigue in combat. I am so proud of him. It was a great weekend of family and friends. Congratulations, Captain Helmers. But to get back on track, if you want to learn more about Bill Keeler at Market Makers and to see some Ranger School photos, you can find them in the show notes at www.salesbabble.com/266. That's all I got for this week, folks. Until next week, take care and have a highly successful and profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.